He is not reinventing the wheel. It's something which has been there.
On public utterances and actions by individual cabinet secretaries, such as the recent outrage by CS Moses Kuria, Mudhaura says that the president cannot distance himself.
The CSs are his appointees. They are his assistants. So they are supposed to support or to execute the directives of the president. That is straightforward. There is no way a CS can argue with the president.
They have called out the Raila Odinga-led opposition on their resolve to disrupt Kenya Kwanza's delivery of services. Azimio leaders during their meeting at Kamukunji grounds Tuesday called their supporters to civil disobedience and non-payment of taxes as a way of protesting against the high cost of living and the Finance Act of 2023.
We cannot, on one hand, purport to respect the law of the land, especially the Constitution. Our president was declared the president, the winner of last year's elections. Then you stand out, you come out there, and you say he's illegally present in office. That's shameful.
Ibrahim Karanja, NTV.
And while the chairperson of the Parliamentary Committee on Finance and National Planning, Kuria Kimani, has lashed out at the Azimio coalition over their calls for tax boycott, the Molo Member of Parliament has termed the calls as a dishonest act aimed at destabilizing the operations of the Kenya Kwanza administration. And as NTV's Sydney Chazima reports, it appears the demand by the opposition to have the Finance Act of 2023 repealed is an exercise in futility.
Just a day after Raila Odinga laid bare the plans by the Azimio coalition to oppose and stall the new tax measures by the Kenya Kwanza administration, Molo MP Kuria Kimani, who is also the chair of the Parliamentary Committee on Finance and National Planning, has come out guns blazing.
Our Azimio brothers and sisters, as it's coming out every day, they are the most dishonest people you'll ever see. They were part of this process. The issues that they contested, or the clauses they actually contested and asked for division, were only two.
Kuria went on to cite why he believes Azimio coalition MPs are being dishonest.
All the other budgets, they approved them. They are always in ministries going to PSS with requests for projects in their constituencies. Then how do we fund them? They did not give us alternative measures.
A majority of the speakers at Azimio's Kamukunji rally, led by Raila Odinga, called on the president to repeal the Finance Act of 2023 in its entirety.
So when they call for repealing of the whole act, unless they really want to just destabilize the country and make sure nothing moves and nothing happens.
The Molo MP took a swipe at Azimio's dismal performance in the National Assembly.
But then we saw them missing in action. You know, they were called to go and vote, and they were not present at the House. Now, for them now to come out and talk in rallies, those debates they're having in rallies is what they should have debated at Parliament and convinced the floor for us to accept the amendment that they were doing.
The new taxes take effect on the 1st of July, thus pitting the Kenya Kwanza administration on a coalition path with the opposition, as the Azimio resistance against the taxes is expected to gain momentum from the 7th of July. Sydney Chazima, NTV.
And we'll certainly be having a deeper conversation on some of those issues that have arisen from that. And now the amount in non-performing loans defaulted by Kenyans increased sharply by 88 billion shillings to a record high of 570.6 billion shillings in the 12 months ended in April, compared to 482.6 billion non-performing loans in April 2022, a sign of financial constraints among Kenyans in a quite harsh economy. The concentration of non-performing loans was mainly in trade, manufacturing, real estate and personal and household sectors in December 2022, according to the Central Bank's Bank Supervision Annual Report 2022. NTV's Melita Oltenges has more.
The harsh economic times have pushed either individuals or institutions to the brink of failing to honor payment of loans borrowed from banks across the country. with new data from the Central Bank of Kenya indicating that there has been an 18.23% increase in non-performing loans. The amount, which stood at 482.6 billion shillings in April last year, is now at 570.6 billion shillings, an increase of 88 billion shillings in the last 12 months.
They are now at 14.9%. Now, it's important to note part of the reason for why the NPLs have been increasing. They are broadly, I would say broadly, they're into two areas. One is a business environment, and the other is the fact that the government, the national government as well as county governments have not been paying some of their suppliers.
CBK data shows that total loans disbursed by banks increased by 14.7% in the last year to 3.924 trillion, up from 3.421 trillion, an increase of 503.1 billion shillings. This means total non-performing loans exceeded the total loans disbursed during the entire year. But the CBK governor says there is a lifeline after the World Bank released monies that shall be disbursed to counties and the national government.
National Treasury has just gotten a lot of resources in the last, I would say, 1 month. They've gotten resources from the World Bank. The World Bank disbursed $1 billion from the development policy operation. Of course, they have also mobilized domestic resources through the infrastructure bond. And with both county governments and the national government paying, we would expect that the level of non-performing loans will decline.
The worst hit sectors are mainly in trade, manufacturing, real estate and personal and household sectors. The cost of borrowing presently is at the highest level since July 2018, with the average commercial lending rate standing at 13.1% as of April, according to CBK data. The World Bank recently warned that pending bills amounting to billions of shillings owed to businesses by the national government and counties are pushing thousands of businesses to default on their loans. Melita Oletinges, NTV.
Meanwhile, the Ministry of Education now says there's a trust deficit among the teachers across the country, which has contributed to cheating in national examinations. This emerged during the 46th Annual Head Teachers Conference in Mombasa, where Education Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Mashogu gave new directives of stemming the rise. Here's NTV's Kevin Mutai with the details.
The blame game of examination malpractices in the country emerged top on the agenda of the Kenya Secondary School Heads Association Conference in Mombasa, the Ministry of Education seemingly pointing an accusing finger at teachers, while the school heads blamed the state agencies, such as the Kenya National Examination Council, of leaking the exams beforehand.
My members have asked me to ask Kenya National Examination Council to assure us that we will not see things flying on mobile phones of exams that are to be done in the morning, even before papers are collected.
Why is a policeman standing behind a principal when they are doing their final work after curriculum delivery? I always urge us that let's be trusted in our theater of operations.
To continue tightening the noose on the offenders who keep mutating their cheating practices, the government shall eradicate early exposure to the examination papers by reviewing the correction procedures of examination materials. In this arrangement, the center manager shall correct the papers in the morning and afternoon, as opposed to correcting all papers for the day at once in the morning.
This was a key issue captured by the Presidential Working Party, which is expected to present its report to the head of state in less than a fortnight. CS Mashogu says mechanisms have been put in place to ensure immediate implementation of the recommendations that will also be touching on key areas surrounding the competency-based curriculum.
It is our conviction that the findings will galvanize a new lifeline to the education reforms and the ever-evolving education sector. Indeed, What I want to promise you is that the Kenya Kwanza administration has a vision. The Kenya Kwanza administration has an agenda for this country.
The school heads are, however, complaining of inadequate capitation, demanding an increase from the current 22,244 shillings to 30,000 shillings. They say that cumulative arrears per student across the country stands at 9,000 shillings from 2021-2022 and 2022-2023 financial years.
When we go to a school, there are 2,000 kids. So we underfund you by around 300. Not because we intended to underfund you, but because you have not updated your status.
The principal citing that the high cost of living has led to increase in food prices, hence straining the available resources in schools.
Encourage parents to pay fees for those in boarding schools, to pay money for lunch and any other money that we will be looking for, because we are not able to meet our budget deficits.
Kindly also do a proper market survey, because I know you are also operating on a very tight financial situation, so that you are able to get the correct figure.
The Kenya Kwanza government has allocated 628 billion shillings to the education sector. The ministry saying the monies will be channeled toward revitalizing education in the country, including recruitment of more teachers and improving the school's infrastructure. Kevin Mutai, NTV in Mombasa.
And residents of Lokumkum village, that's in Baringo South, have now risen to smile after the installation of solar-powered floodlights. Lack of connectivity to electric power had affected normal learning for quite some time, but now children are enjoying doing their homework due to the floodlights. The move to light up villages aims at boosting the region's economy by making it cheaper to conduct businesses in this region. Rozongoi has more details.
As the sun sets in, a cool breeze sweeps over this village in Baringo County, which breaks out in a flurry of activities. Residents gather outside and school children emerge as nightfall sets in. Over the past decade, Lokumkum and nearby villages had no electric power, but today they're connected to a source of power thanks to the solar-powered floodlights. Many of these towns have busy centers, but traders do not realize much in terms of profits. The floodlights that are 20 meters high have enabled the locals to freely walk at night without fear. The power connectivity has become a game changer for the residents. They no longer feel disconnected from the rest of the world.
Wakati hita haikukuwa unapata juu nimeajiriwa pale ninafanya salon, sasa inakuwa challenge juu hakuna taa, inabidi sasa mnafunga tu kazi, but sasa venye hii taa ilikuja imekuwa msaada kwetu, kwa sababu unapata masaa ya kufunga ikifika, hata boss aende na ufunguo yake, you still continue with your work. Unaendelea kama ni customer wako, unamalizia.
Saizi light imefeza kufika, kufanya biashara unaweza kufanya vizuri mpaka kama 10 ama 11, as in size wanaweza kuwa safe.
School-going children can now enjoy their education without darkness. They converge at the center every night to study.
Sasa kama mimi sina hiyo uwezo ya ku-access taa, apata natoa mtoto wangu nje, namfunza homework, namsaidia, anamaliza, tunafunga, tunaenda.
The light is being lit from 6 to late in the evening into morning. Children who have had problem accessing light even in their homes were able to sit down because of the lights, able to do their homework.
Plans are underway to put up additional 10 floodlights in order to fully light up the area. Rozongoi, NTV.
Meanwhile, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission has secured a court order freezing 2 prime properties worth 27.5 million shillings, allegedly partly purchased using money stolen from Vihiga County government. The fraud case under investigations involves the county head of procurement as a main suspect and his 2 wives.
The prime properties frozen by EACC include an apartment at Next Gen Park along Mombasa Road, valued at 14 million shillings. The other property is an apartment at Fourways Junction in Nairobi, valued at 13.5 million shillings. EACC has placed the head of procurement in Vihiga County, Nathaniel Manyeve Ahaza, as the prime architect of the fraud. Other suspects under EACC investigations are his 2 wives, one who is an employee of the county, and a former chief officer and his wife, who are both employees of the county, and other 8 persons. The apartment at Next Gen EACC says is owned by Ahaza and one of his wives. The monies EACC says were wired from Vihiga County government to the suspects' bank accounts. Vincent Odur, NTV.
All right, thanks Vincent for that report. Well, time to take a look at what's been making headlines in the dailies this morning. And of course, we are going to begin with the Daily Nation. I have Taifa Leo here, the Star as well as the Standard. We're going to be taking a very quick look as well on what is happening in the Business Daily as well as on the East African edition this week. But I'm not alone in studio. I'll be introducing my panelists in just a moment, but let's have a look at what's happening on the front page of the Daily Nation. This is what is captured. More Kenyans fail to pay back their loans. Well, this is all about the non-performing loans in the banking sector, which has increased sharply by 88 billion in 1 year to hit a record 570.6 billion in the 12 months ended April, signaling financial distress among businesses and individuals. You can take a look at the numbers there. 88 billion, that's the total increase of non-performing loans in the year ended April. 3.924 trillion, that's the number of total loans disbursed last year, up from 3.421 trillion shillings, according to the government spending on the development. That's also at its lowest in about 8 years. And also, still on the front page, 20,000 new teaching jobs are up for grabs. The government will from next week launch the recruitment of tutors in a bid to bridge the huge staffing deficit facing public schools across the country, which means more promotions are also lined up. This is according to the Teachers Employer, that's the Teachers Service Commission, page 7. A little on the sidelines of what is inside the Daily Nation as well. Impeachment proceedings against Siaya Deputy Governor William Oduor. Well, it's not over yet. This is a message CIMC has had for Deputy Governor William Oduor as they resolve to file a petition at the High Court seeking to have him declared unfit to hold public office. That's on page 21 of the DN. And also, South Koreans get younger under new age counting system. What does that all mean? We're going to see that in just a moment inside the Daily Nation. However, this is what we have also. It's what happened yesterday. Calls for peace as Muslims mark Eid, and a number of pictures there from different parts across the country. Nairobi, you have the Tononoka grounds in Mombasa. You also have Uasin Gishu there in the middle picture. And politicians have been asked to desist from hardline stances and instead embrace dialogue as Muslims around the country flock to mosques and prayer grounds to commemorate Eid al-Adha, as some plan to mark the day on Thursday as well. You have in Mombasa, the main prayer was held at the Tononoka grounds, while those will be marking the day. Today, I've planned to hold the prayers at Ronald Ngala. Of course, Eid al-Adha, or the Feast of Sacrifice, is celebrated by Muslims across the country and the world, as well as a major holiday of 3 to 4 days. Well, let me introduce my panelists this morning so that we can be able to just have a look at the dailies together. I am with Nurdin Kagai, advocate of the High Court, as well as a political analyst. A very good morning. Good to see you. I hope you enjoyed your Eid.
Yes, I did.
Did you celebrated yesterday? You prayed yesterday?
Yes, I did. Fantastic.
We also have Hesbon Owila, media and political communications expert. A very good morning. Hesbon, good to see you this morning. Looking bright. And Peter Mushendo, political and data analyst. Karibu sana, Peter. Good to see you as well. So yesterday we did celebrate Eid. Some of us are still nursing from that. Not hangover, but from taking a lot of meat, you know. But yeah, so this is what happened. But there's been a lot of calls for you know, peace and of course embracing dialogue. But this is an interesting story. So South Koreans get younger as age counting systems changed. Now this lady, you can see the picture here, Lee Jung-hee, was set to turn 60 next year. Actually, sorry, I beg your pardon. I don't think that's a picture of the person they're referring to. But anyway, Lee Jung-hee was set to turn 60 next year, but South Korea dropped its traditional age counting system yesterday. So the Seoul-based housewife just got a year younger, and she's thrilled. South Korea is the last East Asian country to officially still use a method of calculating age that determines babies are aged 1 at birth, counting the months in the womb as their first year of life. Under that system, everyone gets a year older with the turn of the year rather than on their actual birthday, meaning a baby born on the 31st of December would be considered 2 years old on January 1st in Korean age. So that's actually very interesting. I mean, so which means now South Korea will use the international system that calculates age according to a person's actual date of birth, meaning everyone will officially become a year or 2 younger. So that's quite interesting, Hesbon, don't you think?
Very.
I mean, it's because it'd be quite confusing for a foreigner. I mean, so you're going somewhere and someone's saying, I'm celebrating my birthday, but we're literally born the same, probably even the same date, but you're a year older than me. So that's quite interesting. All right, but look, let's move on to something else that is of concern. So signs of economic hardship as bad loans hit a record 570 billion shillings. That's what's captured on the front page of DN. Non-performing loans in the banking sector increasing sharply by 88 billion in 1 year to hit a record 570.6 billion in the 12 months ended April, signaling financial distress among businesses. This is fresh data from the Central Bank of Kenya, which shows that bad loans stood at 482.6 billion in April last year and rose to 18.23% within 12 months. The CBK data showing that total loans disbursed by banks increased by 14.7% in the same period to 3.94 trillion, up from 3.42 trillion. And the ratio of gross non-performing loans to gross loans increased to 14.5% in April this year, up from 14.1% last year. So this is just all about the issue of the state of the economy. Billions of shillings belonging to businesses are also held up by the national and county governments in pending bills, which doesn't really signify a good state of the economy, especially over what is happening. And also still on the economic front, development spent at lowest in 8 years. Spending in development projects dipped by 23.4% in the first 10 months of the financial year, with funds redirected to recurrent expenditure amid below target tax revenue collection. Hit with a cash crunch owing to the growing debt servicing and below par collection of tax revenue by the Kenya Revenue Authority, President Ruto's administration has, through 2 supplementary budgets, adjusted its spending priorities, the net effect being reduction on the overall development budget. Nurdin, when you're looking at that, so we are really reducing in terms of the amount of money that we're putting in development, and you know, most of the money right now is going into recurrent expenditure. What do you think of that? Because look, in numbers, 23.4%, that's the spending on development, which has dropped by this much in the first 10 months of the current financial year. 579 billion is the amount allocated to development in the second supplementary budget. Do you think this is a good strategy by the government?
I think this came courtesy of the 300 billion that they cut from the budget that they got there. And their issue was to actually stabilize the economy, as they were saying. And we are ready to see how that works out as they move into a new financial year, because they just passed the finance bill and now it's an act and everything. So we wait to see how they are going to implement their agenda, because you have to realize they also have a plan under the manifesto. So we wait to see how they actualize their manifesto, noting that they have promised a couple of things in it, be it dams and it all. So it will be quite interesting
to see how they balance that out.
Yes.
Husband?
Yeah, I guess it is. I mean, there are certain things that they needed to do, because I think they got into par with the budget that was passed in the previous admin.
Right.
And I think bridging the shortfalls called for certain measures which they had to take. And now that they have their budget in place, I think it's just a quick, I mean, they have 2 things. Their budget in place, which is not very big on development expenditure.
Right.
And of course, a new taxation regime, which we are yet to see how it will, feed into their manifesto and their development agenda.
Right. Peter, your thoughts?
I think if you look at our debt responsibility this year, it's amounting to around 1.5 trillion, both in paying the principal amount and the interest rates. on the loans that we have taken.
Right.
So I think it's also very important for government to check on its borrowing, because if you look at this year's budget against the last year's financial year budget, we have reduced the borrowing and to about almost 400 billion. You look at the difference, about 400 billion. So I think it is important, even as we consider paying our loans, we also look at how we can curb the recurrence expenditure. Because if you also look at the recurrence expenditure against the development budget, it means the government has to be very deliberate in looking on how to curb that currency expenditure.
Right.
And we see maybe from in the first quarter or the second quarter, how much can we save from the currency expenditure, and probably do a supplementary and reroute that money to development.
So it's all about priorities.
Yeah, it's all about priorities.
All right. Let's see what else. So the meat of what we'll actually be getting into in just a moment as well. And it's all about the tax row. Ruto allies now censure opposition chief. President William Ruto's allies yesterday accused opposition leader Raila Odinga of what they're terming as economic sabotage, saying the government would not take his threats lying down. The Kenya Kwanza Alliance leaders say any attempts to provoke chaos through civil disobedience would meet the full force of the law. He had the National Assembly Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah saying violence would lead to destruction of property. But remember, Odinga on Tuesday announced some measures to deny the government tax in an effort to push for the repealing of the Finance Act 2023, which the opposition has labelled as punitive, saying nationwide protests would resume. He urged tax boycotts through limiting fuel consumption and asked public service vehicle owners and operators to support the boycotts by maintaining the current fares but doubling their carrying capacity. They've also asked traffic police officers to allow matatus to carry standing passengers. He's told businesses to disable or avoid electronic tax registers, make nil returns on value-added tax, and give discounts to customers, and so many other proposals there by opposition leader Raila Odinga. But let me begin with you, Nurdin. When you're looking at this, just because we're going to get into the meat of the conversation in a little bit later, but just generally, this new proposals by the opposition leader in terms of defying and protesting the finance bill, he's asking for an entire repealing of the finance bill 2023. Is that sensible?
Well, you see, first and foremost, the most interesting thing is that whatever he's proposing is bound to happen whether he proposes it or not. Because you see, times are tough and people will look for ways to actually survive. Now, the proposals that he has given, some of them are like tax evasion. Some of them are illegality.
I mean, that's criminal.
That's an illegality, you know. So that in itself would put you in danger if you're actually found to be doing so. Now, you look at some of the members of parliament that were with him, and that is where the saddest reality comes in. Some of them were speaking. If you look at even someone like Silasia, he was not in the house during that debate, during the voting. So you see, most of the time, this is the sad reality. Members of parliament forget that their work is in that house, but they come out here for optics and to rant like you and I, who have a space of social media and just airing out our grievances. Now, we look at the proposals he has made. Yes, at the end of the day, let me give you a good example of the state of the economy. Yesterday was Eid, right? And normally during this Eid, we actually slaughter goats, right? If you look at the price of the goats that we were buying yesterday,
quite high,
vis-a-vis what we were buying the other years, it shows you the state of the economy. And I was talking to a certain merchant who was telling me, the sad reality is that business was very bad yesterday because most people didn't buy goats because there's no money. And that tells you the state of the economy. And so he's just highlighting what he feels will happen in the course of time. But I believe certain things like tax evasion really should not be part and parcel of that, because that is an illegality. But things like carpooling, that is bound to happen. It even happens today. There are those who Uber pool and what have you. Because when things get tough, people have to find a way of survival. So whatever isn't an illegality is fine. But we wait to see what happens, because we've had the leaders from Kenya Kwanza who have actually castigated him for what he has said. And things like, you know, they're calling for demonstration. on the 7th of July.
Saba Saba.
It's the rebirth of Saba Saba. And if you look at the history of Saba Saba, that's why we end up having Article 37 in the Constitution, right to demonstrate and picket, because people they never used to have that right. But you have to realize that it has to be peaceably, as you're doing whatever you're doing. Now the point of departure is, when does it stop being peaceful? Because we also have to understand that. Because if we were to look at, for example, the mandamanos that he has had a couple of months ago, as they dance, as they move, when does the chaos start? What is the reason for the chaos? Because even if we're being told he'll be sent GSU upon him, we also need to understand, when does this protest change from being a peaceful march, a peaceful picketing demonstration, into a chaotic scene, into theft, into deaths and injuries? Okay. So that we understand. I've seen there's a member of parliament try to do some legislation. We just hope and pray.
That's Sembere North
yes,
MP.
We hope and pray, because right. I'm seeing he's looking into Article 24 on the limitation of certain rights and freedoms. He should be alive to the fact that whatever he's trying to propose should not then contravene Article 37, because if it does, that law that he'll propose in Parliament, if it passes, then it will be declared unconstitutional at the end of the day.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me hear from Hesbon. And even as you ask those questions, there's also the question of the impact of some of these proposals, really, Hesbon. Just very quickly, general outlook of some of these things that now been fronted by the opposition leader, Raila Odinga.
I don't think there's anything new that Raila is saying. I think he's just putting it in the normal language that a common Mwananchi would understand, and probably just taking cue to be ahead of what is bound to happen. Because naturally, what happens when there are tax increases is that there is some decrease in consumer demand. And in this case, when you look at you know, the 16% VAT, what that would mean is that the cost of fuel would go high. And if there is a decrease in demand for fuel, what that would mean is that fewer people will be driving to work anyway. And the consequence of that is either people will be carpooling or people will board matatus. And I think that would naturally push the threshold of the number of people who will be demanding matatu services to a new high. And the consequence of that is that, you know, matatus, because they'll also feel the pinch of this, due to the fact that the fuel that they'll be using under ordinary circumstances will now be slightly expensive. Matatus would want to, you know, leverage on the demand that they'll have, you know, to cushion them from the cost of fuel. So there is a high likelihood that matatus will actually have more people, you know, and they would be inclined to onboard more people into vehicles that probably don't carry as much as they would be carrying right now. So I think Raila is just being ahead of the queue of what the consequences of this, you know, new tax regime is all about.
But when you talk about disabling electronic tax registers to make nil returns on VAT, what does that mean? You
know, I mean, studies have shown that whether we like it or not, when their tax increases, the basic consequence is that people would stop, you know, demanding for certain goods that they can do away with. You know, but at another level, people would start avoiding paying tax. That is a natural consequence. So it's not like Raila is saying that go and do this, but that is exactly what people under normal circumstances. But that's exactly what he's saying. No, that is what I'm telling you is he's saying that, but whether he had said it or not, those are consequences of increase in taxes in any economy. That there is likely to be a lot of tax avoidances, and people would resort to means that would help them. And of course, it's illegal not to pay taxes, you see. So it's not like it's out of this world that Raila has made a big statement about, you know, this tax regime. Those are natural consequences. And the fact that Raila said that basically is just a question of Raila being a very, you know, creative politician who knows how to harness the energies of people, and in this case, how to harness the negative sentiments, you know, around this bill.
So does it mean then he's taking advantage of the fact that when Kenyans are facing such a tough economic situation, that you know, if you put those words in my mouth, you're making me look. No. I mean,
like I'm taking sides, right? and you know, I'm just talking about the reality. Okay. Whether he's taking advantage or not, I think in the game of politics, there are certain things that politicians do, and it is the hallmark of a good politician. That you have to be at the cutting edge of the feelings of the common Mwananchi.
Right.
And I think that is where where Raila is. I mean, if you ask me, as Kenyans, we ought to have just, experienced this tax, and seen the consequences of this tax, But we are Kenyans, but they are politicians. So politicians will find a way of leveraging on anything that touches on the allocation and distribution of resources to be seen to be the ones who are championing the interest of the people. And at this point, I think Raila is redefining himself as the Raila that we know, the one who fights for the interest of the people. And you can't fault him for doing that.
Let's hear from Peter on your thoughts on the same, just generally.
Well, I think for me it's the usual and normal hypocritical approach on this issue by Raila Odinga, because as my co-panelist has said, this is not the first time Raila is telling us to avoid paying tax. But you will also find that Raila Odinga in person is an entrepreneur in this country, and at no given time has his companies being found to have evaded tax. So that means he will ask me and the other hustlers and our fellow Kenyans not to pay tax, but he still pays his obligations to government, notwithstanding the fact that both Raila Odinga, Kalonzo Musyoka, and the Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta in this budget are receiving 0.64 billion from taxpayers' money, as money they are supposed to be given to having served this country. It's very hypocritical that you drive from the airport all the way to the place you are telling people to pay, not to pay tax. You're driven by government-funded vehicles, drivers, security, and you also are a very big beneficiary of the budget, money that will be derived from the very tax that we are proposing to correct. So I think for me it's that we must read by examples as readers. It was very funny looking at members of parliament who were no-show at the National Assembly to oppose the so-called finance bill, being the people who are shouting at the highest of their voice. I ought to believe that me and my fellow co-panelists, we should be the one shouting here if we feel the finance bill has a problem. And I think it would legitimize the concerns of the MPs in that rally if they actually went to parliament and performed their civic duty, because I wish they went to parliament and said no, and then came and said, yes, I went and I did my civic duty. My vote of saying no to the finance bill did not carry the day, and that's the reason why I'm here ranting. But it cannot be that the very people who have been given authority in Article 1 of the Constitution to represent the people do not do their civic duty in parliament, and then they join the opposition leader in a rally somewhere to actually declare on how the tax, that the new tax have been brought are very bad on Kenyans. So I think for me, it's that I wish Raila would start by example, by not paying tax. But you know what? He will never fail to pay tax because he is benefiting with almost 200 million plus from the same budget. And the ramifications of not paying tax, it means he may not access that fund. So I think for me, well, whatever he is saying might be something that is guaranteed by our democracy, what you call the normal picketing and demonstrating. That is a right that is very profound in our constitution, and it is assured by our democracy. It is very hypocritical for the former Prime Minister to tell Kenyans not to pay tax while he continues to honor his obligations because of the very benefits.
But don't you find some sort of legitimacy into some of the concerns the leaders from Azimio are raising in terms of, yes, you talk about some of them members of parliament who are not there, but when looking at the principles when they do speak and they're saying, look, this is quite punitive for Kenyans, and that's why we are standing with Kenyans at this point.
But you know, I've always said, and I've had this notion, people saying that there is no nation that actually developed by taxing its people. But I will also refute that by saying there is no nation that has been very successful in the world that did not start by taxing its people. Go to the very democracies that we pride ourselves in emulating. the United States, India, Singapore, all those UK. Look at how they built their economy to be where it is. For the economy to have stabilized, they had to go an extra mile. People had to feel the pinch so that they can build their nation. And I'll tell you the problem we have in this country. It is that the political class, either for or against the finance bill, has not been honest about it. That we have made Kenyans feel like the government is out to actually kill them or to actually make them suffer. But that is not the case. I am not saying that probably this finance bill is the best, but I'll tell you, the people who are already out there poisoning Kenyans and making Kenyans who are already feeling the pinch, because I will not stand here and tell you that life
but you have economic experts. You have economic experts who raise concerns on some of the things that are
but I will surprise you the problem I have with those people who are now shouting at the top of their voice against the finance bill. The so-called financial expert, I want to be furnished with the memorandums that they served Parliament with, because we have established a legislative process in this country which we must honor, because this is a constitution we have given to ourselves, that if you feel this finance bill had issues, it is your responsibility.
But they did. You have how many? More than 1,000 memorandums.
Yeah. That's why I'm saying.
Right.
But you look at those memorandums and you look at them, because the conversation, as I said last time when I was here, it should have been, how can we amend the finance bill? But you cannot bring a memorandum that is asking Parliament to withdraw the entire finance bill. You should have come with amendments. How many of those amendments were brought in Parliament, and how many were brought in good faith?
Do you feel the Kenya Kwanza team might have taken advantage of their majority number in Parliament to pass those clauses?
You see, the canon, let me tell you, the canon law of democracy is that minority will have their say and majority will have their way.
So isn't that
unless somebody wants to explain me that our democracy is not set on those principles, because how do we form government? We form government through political parties. Political parties have their numbers in Parliament. And if there is a government agenda that comes to Parliament, it is the responsibility of that government.
What does that speak of? Separation of powers?
No, I'm telling you, it is, yes, but you see, this is a government agenda brought to Parliament. If the government is able to marshal its numbers into supporting their agenda, unfortunately so, that is the canon rules of democracy that Kenya has given to itself.
Of Parliament?
Yes?
Unfortunately so, wouldn't that be termed as capture of Parliament?
It is not capture. Okay. It is not capture.
All right, we have to take a break. Let me hear from Nurdin, then Hezbollah, very quickly.
You see, you just said it well. It's a captured house, whether they like it or not, and that is why.
But Peter says, I mean, you have a government that leads its own, has its own political agenda through the executive. It has to push, because that's why they have a majority of number in Parliament.
So if the government wants to legislate on having every Kenyan to lose one arm, so because of majority it has to pass, it doesn't make sense. Parliament has to draw a line. You know, this is the sad reality that we have. We have 3 arms of government, and this is why most members of Parliament forget. By virtue of being in Kenya Kwanza, it does not mean you stop being an arm of government. They forget that the oversight role is still upon them and not on an Azimio entirely. They believe because I'm in Kenya Kwanza, I am government, so Azimio can check what the government is doing. That is what they keep saying. They forget that they are meant to represent, legislate, and oversight, because they're an arm of government, and that is why appropriation of the budget happens in that house. But the sad reality is that there is no thin line, because we were told by the majority whip, government does not lose. And then we keep asking this question, who is the government fighting? Because at the end of the day, members of Parliament are our spokespeople in that house. Because whatever you want, or whatever idea you have, they are meant to represent. And if they feel any law is being pushed by the executive and would be draconian, they can pull it back. And that is where they need to understand that not everything the government wants, rather let me say executive, so that they understand they're also an arm of government. Not everything the executive wants, it passes. They also have to draw a line. And I think they need a crash course on what an MP needs to do, as opposed to always crying for CDF. Because their attention is always on CDF. And that is why they walked out on the induction. They forget the laws that are passed in that house are most important. That is why, like he rightfully said, there are those we saw at Kamukunji making the loudest noise, and during the discussions in Parliament, they were not there.
So it cuts across the political divide. I'll
Yes,
come
it
to you
does.
as well in a moment. We have to really take this break on AM Live. Talk to us. The hashtag, as always, is MLive NTV at NTV Kenya at Zainab Ismail. We're going to be back after a very short while. Stay with us.
What is it now?
You must leave everything exactly as the way it is now.
Fine. We will do as you say, officer.
I hope you can hear me the way I could hear you. Just so you can see what it feels like to inhabit the world of shadows. I don't really care if you understand. I just want you to suffer as much as I did.
Reject him, they are looking for you.
No!
Come on, do it fast!
I don't like you snapping your fingers at me, Rodrigo!
Diego. I'm Diego. Rodrigo is in a coma. Head over heels.
2 out of 3 Kenyan parents felt that they don't spend enough quality time with their kids. You can help change this by giving a generous voice to Storytime. Visit our library of homegrown audio stories at cadbury.africa and make Storytime sweeter.
Safaricom Business is enabling organizations to connect, protect, enable, and transfer
APLC tokens, Bela charges, only on Airtel Money. Dial *334#. Select Lipana Airtel Pay Bill.
One year. The TSC chairperson Jamlek Muturi made the announcement yesterday during the ongoing 101 Palana in unremitted capitation funds, which about translates to more than 34.7 billion since secondary school enrollment was 3.9 million in 2022, according to the Economic Survey 2023. So that's what's happening in the education sector as well. And very quickly as well, MPs summon lands CS over 997 acres surrendered by Del Monte. Thus, members of parliament have summoned the lands cabinet secretary and officials from Murang'a County over the 997 acres of land surrendered by Del Monte, Kenya for the benefit of residents. The National Assembly's Land Committee saying the ministry and the county government had failed to implement the recommendations of the House to have the land allocated to Kandara Residents Association for settlement. Also on the sidelines of that page, third round of Shakahola postmortems ends. Well, a total of 338 postmortem examinations have been conducted on the bodies retrieved from Shakahola in Kilifi County. The examinations were conducted on 201 adults and 117 children associated with Pastor Paul Mackenzie's Good News International Ministries. While addressing journalists at Malindi Sub-County Hospital on Tuesday, government pathologist Dr. Johnson Odwar says they were unable to ascertain the ages of some 20 bodies. He says there are plans underway for the 4th phase of the exhumation exercise to see if there are any more graves in Shakahola Forest. Out of the total bodies, 131 were male, 185 were female, while the gender of 22 others could not be ascertained at that particular point. All right, so that's what is happening with regard to that as well. Retired judge in spot for releasing pedophile. A retired judge has come under heavy scrutiny and criticism for ordering the release of a convicted pedophile who was serving a 50-year jail term at Committee Maximum Prison. Justice Momanyi, who retired in March, ordered the release of Terry Ray Krieger from prison in November of last year, that's 2022, saying it will be oppressive to order for a retrial of the convict who is an American citizen. Krieger, who was serving a jail term for taking and circulating videos of minors in nude and compromising positions, had challenged the sentence for being too harsh and punitive. The sentence was imposed on him by former Milimani Senior Principal Magistrate Joseph Karanja on December 2nd, 2014. The DPP had urged Justice, that is Justice Momanyi, to uphold the sentence. However, in his judgment, Justice Momanyi noted the appellant had served 8 years from the 50 years slapped on him. So this is also what is happening within the courts. And also NMG's Wheat Expo starts today to tackle challenges in the sector. The Nation Media Group's Wheat Expo is starting in Eldoret, that's in Uasin Gishu County, today, bringing together stakeholders and farmers in the sector for the next 2 days. It's a whole big issue where 6 stakeholders are expected to converge for the premier expo of this at a time where huge demand for wheat has been reported following the global disruption of supply as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war. And finally, let me just get to see what's on the Business Daily as well. Treasury sets cash hiring limits and spending shocker. We can see the Treasury Cabinet Secretary there, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u. The Treasury has set monthly cash limits to government ministries, departments and agencies, and restricted recruitment of new staff, promotions and pay rise deals as part of wide-ranging measures to deal with the wastage of public funds amid tight budget conditions. The CS saying the fixed monthly cash disbursements to MDAs will be tied to available funds, with priority given to 4 categories of expenditure. All right, you can get that in the Business Daily on the ticker. Last-minute debt review opens 39 billion hole in Kenya's debt. The Treasury has fallen short of its domestic borrowing target for the fiscal year ending June 30th by 39 billion, following the last-minute upward revision that was expected to raise funds to settle pending fuel subsidy bills. UK company to pay 14.5 billion for Lake Turkana wind power stake, and also emergency lending rate at 5-year high. And then also what was captured on the front page of Daily Nation, it's all about the defaulting of Kenyans on the 83 billion bank loans in 4 months. Borrowers defaulting on extra 82.9 billion loans in just 4 months, signaling the economic struggles that have seen the share of non-performing loans hit that 36-year high. All right. On, let's see, Taifa Leo. Rais Ruto alivuka mpaka? That's a question they're asking, and it's a question I'll ask my panelists as well. Hatua ya Rais William Ruto kuruhusu washauri wake watatu na katibu mkuu wa chama cha United Democratic Alliance Cleophas Malala kuhudhuria mikutano ya baraza la mawaziri imezua maswali kuhusu iwapo alivuka mpaka uliowekwa na katiba. Big question there on what some have termed as strangers in the cabinet. Are they really strangers? There was a precedent ruling by Justice Anthony Mrima. We'll have a look at that as well. Mahakama ilikuwa pia imebatilisha uteuzi uliofanywa na Uhuru. And what does this mean? Is there going to be a legal quagmire when we're talking about this particular issue? That's what you can also find on Taifa Leo. Mishahara yafagia fedha za maendeleo na mtihani wa majaribio wa KCSE somo la Kiingereza unaweza upata katika ukurasa wa 10 wa Taifa Leo. Pia vile vile serikali kuajiri walimu 20,000. All right. On the East African, just regionally, have a look at what's been happening. Budgets, IMF, World Bank have their way. The hand of the Bretton Woods institutions is conspicuous in the spending plans of East Africa economies as they grapple with debt, budget deficits, and pro-people projects. But hard times lie ahead, and you can see all the presidents of the East African states there. Kenyan President William Ruto, Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, and Rwandan President Paul Kagame. And there you have it. Also very interesting picture there. The President William Ruto received by his French host Emmanuel Macron at the LEC Palace. At the sidelines of the new Global Finance Pact Summit, Ruto stood out for his push for a change in world order. A picture there by AFP. And That is what we did see happen over the weekend as well. UN accuses Rwanda of aiding M23 once again. A group of experts allege that Kigali helps rebels with troop reinforcement, equipment and command through the RDF. All what's happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo and the war within the eastern part of that country. And also what EAC push to ditch dollar means for the region. You can get that on page 6 of the East African, because you have the bloc which is stepping up campaign to use local currencies in trading as bullish greenback is hurting economies. Okay, and well, let's see on the Standard just very quickly. Standard is talking about strangers in cabinet, expanded cabinet, and let's have a wider look at that story and what it talks about. Then we'll have a discussion around that before we move forward. And let's see. Okay, so Ruto's cabinet of strangers, they say, which is going to set to open legal battle with the opposition. So I want to hear from, let me begin with you, Hesbon, because I left it with you at that point, because there are a number of things that have come out from this. So you have 3 advisors and the UDA Secretary General, Cleophas Malala, who took the oath of secrecy and actually attended the first cabinet. But it appears it's going to open a legal battle with the opposition, saying you have opposition who are now coming out to say that they are not allowed to have, strangers within the cabinet. If I was going to have a look at what Article 152 says, the composition of cabinet should have the president, the deputy president, the attorney general, not fewer than 14 and not more than 22 cabinet secretaries so far. But you have, what they term, are they really strangers from where you sit?
Well, I think they are. they are strangers, and it's interesting that strangers are sitting with, one of the cabinet secretaries who back then as a member of parliament actually termed people who sat with them in cabinet as strangers. I don't know what her feelings are right now that there are 3 strangers, not just one. And I think it is four strangers, not just one. And I think for me, the question is not the opposition instituting a legal challenge. It's just a question of any other Kenyan can. Because we all have access to the Constitution and the provisions of the constitutions. And there's even a precedent. There's a case law that set a precedent that this is in contravention of the Constitution. But I think the most critical question would be, what is the value add? I mean, when you have these 4 additions to the cabinet, what exactly are they bringing to the cabinet, in terms of the substantive issues that are discussed in cabinet that then have an effect on the lives of Kenyans? And if there were substantive, contributions that they were making by attending cabinet, I think it is just proper that the due process is followed. I mean, the cabinet secretaries have to be vetted through parliament. I don't think it's just a question of taking the oath of secrecy. It's a question of, they go through parliament where all Kenyans are represented, because members of parliament are representatives of each and every Kenyan in this country. So that vetting process, the fact that vetting process in itself, is not part and parcel of this 4 joining the cabinet, raises a number of questions that are just of public interest. And then number 2, if they were to add value, do they have to be sitting in cabinet for them to add value? Can they just sit outside cabinet and add that value? I mean, the president has, all the leeways to do whatever he wants to do. I think in the last regime, President Kenyatta appointed the Jubilee Secretary General as a cabinet member who went through parliament and was vetted. Now, I think President Ruto is taking cue by appointing Malala. I have no idea what Malala's contribution is going to be, especially given what they had said the CAS would be doing, that the CAS would be like the political figureheads in most of these ministries. So it's not just opposition. I think it's a question that Kenyans will be very keen on. And I'm sure it's not even a member of the political class who would have a legal issue with that. It's just Kenyans who have interest in the rule of law and adherence and fidelity to the rule of law would take this.
Okay, Peter, let me hear your thoughts on Ruto's cabinet of so-called strangers. Are they really strangers?
I think it is the normal behavior of Kenyans to blow things out of proportion, if you ask me. In terms of the legality of the same, I've seen people who have said they want to go to court and challenge it. I respect the rule of law, so I would wait and see what Kinan Oldin and the Rigo field come up with. But if you look at the ruling of Justice Murema, it was simply based on the fact that Badi was a Director General of a certain institution. And we have quite a number of Director Generals. In Kera we have a Director General. In Kenya we have a Director.
But is it about the position that
I think
individuals hold, or
yes.
is it about, first of all, the legality of the fact that, because if I look at part of the ruling, is that the judge said, found that the Constitution does not give powers to the President to choose other persons to attend cabinet meetings. It was very clear.
But you see, a cabinet, if you look at, again in the Constitution, on the responsibilities of the cabinet, one of the responsibilities of the cabinet is to actually advise President based on sound advices. And I think for me it's very clear. For the case of Monique Juma, who is a security advisor, I think it's the normal occurrence in the Commonwealth nations where you see security advisors being co-opted into cabinet. The current Kenya Kwanza government is implementing the agendas of the party. And therefore, the party that has nominated the president currently, who is the chair of the cabinet, if the president deems it right to co-opt the Secretary General of the party so that he can put the manifesto of the party and the happenings of the government into a context of some kind, I think it's a leeway that the president may be allowed to do. As to the legal implications of the same, I wait to see, because if you want to base the legality of those people being in cabinet on the ruling of Justice Mulema, I believe that the context under which the current water minister went to court is very far and different from what the president has done.
Really, how far?
So okay. I think for me, we are reading too much into something that should not actually be our concern. These are guys who are already, they have not been brought and given new jobs in the cabinet. These are already guys who are on advisorial role of the presidency. So if the president deems it fit for them to come into cabinet and do a presentation, it is actually normal for them to be sworn in, so that whatever they advise the cabinet remains within the confines of the oath of secrecy. You know, people are leading it as if that they have been cleared to be attending every other cabinet meeting.
But they are.
No, that is not the case. They were cleared to come and advise the cabinet on some things. And tomorrow, if the governor of Central Bank is required to come to the cabinet and advise them, he will still take that oath of secrecy. I think we just bring these out of proportion of an.
Okay, so we have an advocate here. Just give us. Okay, so legal implication. Peter says there's nothing to worry about, but let's hear from you. What do you think of it?
Peter is my friend, and he's at pains to defend that decision. You see, and he's been frugal with the truth. These guys have been sworn in to attend cabinet, and if you look at Justice Murema's decision, in calling them strangers, in calling Badis a stranger back then, he said two things. The reason was, there is no means of oversight. The term of office is an illusion. So that in itself is a problem. There's no means of how will you oversight what Malala does in cabinet? How will you oversight what Felix Koski is doing in cabinet? How will you oversight what Harriet Chigai is doing in cabinet? How will you oversight what David D is doing in cabinet? And then the term is an illusion. Those are some of the problems. And now, you see, the reality is that we have this problem called fuata nyayo, or copy and paste, where now that person who came before you did something, you end up doing the same thing but with a taste of yours. If he or she was wearing an Italian suit, you go for a different brand, but it's still a suit. And the problem is, we don't understand the reason why we like bloating things. From a bloating motorcade, now you want to have an extravagant cabinet. And the terms of office of these individuals is not known. And you see, the sad reality is that this government came into office saying they will observe the rule of law. Certain actions have been done that are contrary to that. This is the latest one. Because at the end of the day, if you look at what the Constitution says, you rightfully read it there. It talks about the number that is needed in cabinet. Why the need to fill those seats. I think there's certain source, a couple of empty seats in there, like to Jazz Hazel. It doesn't make sense. That's how it looks. It really doesn't make sense. And more so to Kenyans who are out here wondering where their money goes to. Now, there are certain questions that we need to understand. Will these people have the same benefits as cabinet secretaries? If yes, under which law? You see, those are the problems. And these things it keeps happening because Uhuru did something, I want to do it, but with a touch. He had two, Badi and Tuju. But since the decision by Mirima, Badi disappeared, apparently, from attending cabinet.
Officially.
Yes. But now he had two, I'll have four. So the next president will have six. It really doesn't make sense. We really need to
But
observe.
look at it this way. Okay, so you have all this, legal conversation around this. There's actually a report that we aired before you guys arrived. I don't know if my director, John Te, can be able to just play us that report. It was by Ibrahim Karanja. It was some statements that were made by former cabinet secretary Jacob Kaimenyi. You have a career civil servant, Mudhaura, who had a number of things to say on why this really isn't a big deal. I don't know if, John, we can have that?
The move by President William Ruto to clear 4 new faces to sit in cabinet meetings continues to draw mixed reactions. UDA Secretary General Cleopas Malala, Chair of the President's Economic Council David Ndii, the President's Defense Advisor Monica Juma, and the President's Advisor on Women Rights Harriet Chigai on Tuesday sat through their first meeting at the cabinet, having taken an oath of secrecy. Former head of public service as well as secretary to the cabinet in the Kibaki administration, Ambassador Francis Mudhaura, and former education cabinet secretary in President Uhuru Kenyatta's first term, Professor Jacob Kaimenyi, stating that there is no cause for alarm.
Why are you talking as if it's the first time? The former government, where I was privileged to serve, who was Tuju? Secretary to the party, isn't it? He was allowed to be there. If in his wisdom the president feels that Marara be there, why not? He's not reinventing the wheel. It's something which has been there.
On public utterances and actions by individual cabinet secretaries, such as the recent outrage by CS Moses Kuria, Mudhaura says that the president cannot distance himself.
The CSs are his appointees. They are his assistants. So they're supposed to support or to execute the directives of the president. That is straightforward. There is no way a CS can argue with the president.
They have called out the Raila Odinga.
All right, so that's just part of that report that was filed by Ibrahim Karanja, but it does capture, some statements from people who've served within government. Hezbon, what do you make of it?
I think they are taking that context out of what the substantive issues are. I think Tuju was a cabinet secretary without a portfolio, and I think we should not really. I have a lot of respect from Thaura, and I think I understand what he's saying, that it's not such a big deal. He didn't elaborate, but I think what makes it a big deal is the fact that there is no oversight mechanism. And there is no way we can hold them accountable. And most importantly, they've not been vetted by parliament. But I think the other speaker, let me not mention the name, I think it's too cold outside there. I think those substantive statements that he's making like he's an authority, yet there's a broader context to this. There's a constitution, there's a precedent that has been made in a court of law to say that it's not such a big deal. The way Tuju came into cabinet and the way Malala is coming into cabinet are totally different, things altogether. One is just being sneaked in. The other one was appointed with the other cabinet secretaries. So I think when people are looking for relevance, they want to make comebacks, they should find a way of doing that without distorting the context of what is going on in Kenya today. Right. But I think having said that, I think whatever the president wants to do is okay. But it must be adding value to Kenyans. And if it is adding value to Kenyans, why is it that it is not going through parliament? Because that is where the representatives of Kenyans are.
So,
you know, we cannot sit in a situation where when numbers work for them, it is okay. But when they know that even their numbers would be against what they are doing, they try shortcuts. But there is something I needed to say. I don't know whether you want me to say now or respond later.
We're going to have to take a very short break, and then we'll come back to that. But Peter, just as we wind up on this, I mean on that particular, not on that, but yes, on you've had some of those statements.
Yes,
as well.
I think it will be concerning me if the said strangers, as they are putting it, were part of the votes taken in the cabinet or the resolution. These are members of the presidential technical teams. So we already know their position in government. They have not been sneaked like they are trying to imply. Cleophas Marara is the Secretary General of the one of the major ruling parties.
But Peter, there was a precedent
but you see,
ruling on the same, right?
A cabinet can be allowed to bring in a technical team to advise it on the way forward. And it is very clear from the presidential memo. These members are neither part of the vote that is taken on cabinet resolutions, neither are they part of the cabinet resolutions that they are made. Okay. They just appear to come and advise the cabinet. It would concern me if they took a vote in cabinet or they are part of the cabinet resolutions, of which they are not.
Okay.
But I think the critical thing is, if they are just technical people who advise,
where they've been sworn in,
why can they just advise?
It is
without being in cabinet.
It is in line with the oath of secrecy that anything that they talk within the cabinet, they have to be sworn in, so that whatever they advise the cabinet remains in the confines of the cabinet. So I do not see anything wrong with them being sworn in, so that whatever they tell the cabinet remains within the confines of the cabinet.
Okay. Yeah, let's have that break. We're going to be back, and we'll continue with our conversation as we take a look at what some of the statements by opposition leader Raila Odinga really mean, and some of the implications of the same in terms of the tax proposals and tax row that is now emerging. All right, let's have that quick break. We'll be back.
I come from a family of 5 children, and I'm the last born in terms of boys. And I have 2 sisters who come after me. Just seeing them having to go through their period time without a pad. And so they had to resort to other means of finding pads, or, of just surviving that phase. The pad center is a very special place for many young girls and women, because we are the first pad center, I dare say, that any woman, regardless of your creed, your social status, or where you come from, can walk into a pad center and you'll be given a pad for free with no questions asked. And secondly, I've met a number of women who, in one way or the other, just because of a pad, they've been robbed of their dignity, and it has led to a lot of shame. Some of them in school, we know that there are girls who are staying away from school because a few weeks or a few days before they experience their periods, they'll stay away because they are avoiding accidents. And accident means that it can start without them having a pad or without them knowing.
Nunua KPLC tokens, Bela charges. Only on Airtel Money. Dial *334#. Select Lipa na Airtel Pay Bill, then select KPLC.
Do not hold back in any situation. Eno gets to work on the 6 symptoms of heartburn fast.
You do know you said all of that out loud, right?
If symptoms persist, seek medical advice.
my shirt, a toss of lavender, and a world of freshness.
Wash your clothes with Toss Lavender to leave your clothes with a lasting, irresistible freshness.
What if she's doing something to herself right now? What are you saying? How can I possibly calm down? Do you even have children? Can you imagine your own child having a breakdown?
Frankly speaking, I know that you'll be offended. However, understand that I would like to forget about your daughter in any way as soon as possible.
You don't understand, officer. What if my wife needed my help? Don't worry, there are people who can help her in case of an emergency. Please, you don't understand me. It's you who can't understand.
I won't tell anything to anybody. But on one condition.
What do you want? I want you to divorce Dennis immediately and leave the city.
New Sensodyne Repair and Protect with Deep Repair. It's a huge game changer for me. The science is there. It's going to improve the quality of my life in a big way. The new Sensodyne Repair and Protect with Deep Repair.
Own your dream home for as low as 1.98 million Kenya shillings in Vipingo Kilifi. SMS Vipingo to 22365 or call us today on 0740 400 215. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, and welcome back to the program. You're watching AM Live. Just going back to our pending conversation on the issue of the tax row, divisive taxes. The Star says Raila is asking Kenyans to boycott paying taxes, outlined several plans to puncture them. But the Ruto team is accusing Raila of being reckless. Why? Because the former Prime Minister is asking Kenyans to boycott paying taxes to cripple the Kenya Kwanza administration. And even with that, you do have Ndindi Nyoro, the Kiharu Member of Parliament, who says, look, you know, the opposition has lost its focus and objectivity and its role to checkmate the government. And that's what he had to say. And just looking at a number of other people there, allied, some of the members of parliament allied to the Kenya Kwanza team, saying that this is not the way to go and that this strategy is not going to work with Kenyans this time around. Let me begin with you, Peter, still on the same. Do you think Raila's, calls for tax boycotts is going to have any impact on the economy if really Kenyans end up, following through with some of those proposals?
I do not think that the calls by the opposition leader will have so much adverse effect on the operations of government, considering the fact that every other Kenyan is out there trying to make an ends meet, and nobody wants to be pulled into the issue of evasion of tax. But the truth of the matter is that I would want the opposition leader to be leading by example. I have seen the former leader of opposition in Uganda, Kizza Besigye, making it real, saying that we are going to stop using motor vehicles so that we can boycott the fuel taxes that were introduced in Uganda. And they started walking to work until such a time the government of Yoweri Kaguta Museveni had to barricade Kizza Besigye's house to stop him from walking because people are already buying into that idea. But we have a political class that wants the normal mwananchi to do one thing and they do the other thing. Look at the motorcade they used from the JKIA to the place they were telling Kenyans not to pay tax, not to use vehicles. But they are using vehicles and they are using guzzlers, they are using the same thing. So I think for me, it is not going to have a lot of effect because if it is not an honest request that is read by the example of Raila and Kohut doing exactly what they are telling Kenyans to do, then I think that as long as that political class advocating for it does not take the center stage in leading by example, that they are suggesting is not going to be effective. It might have some effect in one way or the other, but it will not be as big as they would expect it to be.
We did ask Hezbon master stroke or misstep. What do you think of the political step, the strategy that Raila Odinga is employing? Civil disobedience, yes, it's allowed in the constitution, but in this particular essence, do you think this is a right direction, politically speaking, for Raila Odinga?
Well, I think politically speaking, I don't know whether it's the right direction for Raila Odinga or not, but I think it gives Raila Odinga an opportunity to, go back to the Raila Odinga that the pro-people Raila Odinga, that big constituency that he lost to President William Ruto just before the last election. Because when you have a government in power and there are things that the masses feel the government is doing or not doing that affect them negatively and directly, the masses will essentially identify with the person who takes that government head on. And I think that is the situation that this civil disobedience puts Raila Odinga on. And there are certain things that are already empirically proven. Mm-hmm. And I think I've talked about this, that when you increase taxes, there are a number of consequences. The most obvious one is that people will cut down on their expenditure, and then you move up to people who will try and avoid paying taxes through very innovative ways of doing that. Mm-hmm. And then there is another level that may not be, clear to the common mwananchi or immediately clear, the level of stifling entrepreneurship and innovation. So most industries, most companies that innovate, pump money into entrepreneurship would cut down on that, and it has a ripple effect in the tax base generally. And then lastly, there is also the issue of inflation, that the prices of goods are likely to go up. And I think Raila Odinga and the Azimio team are basically positioning themselves there, that when things become hard, they will be at the cutting edge to say that we've been with Kenyans through all this. It's not like these things that Raila is saying are going to be done because Raila said them, but they're going to happen because those are the consequences that have been empirically proven through research. But let me just say that maybe Peter is giving Azimio an idea that if they picked, I don't know where this would go. If Kizza Besigye managed, to cause havoc in Uganda by walking to work, mm-hmm. and I think enough people have jumped into this bandwagon of saying that this is what Azimio said, but they went driving fuel guzzlers, they left Kamukunji in fuel guzzlers. Who knows? Maybe that was just a ploy. First of all, to get people into all this idea that they speak what they cannot do. And it seems like everyone has swallowed that hook, line, and sinker. What would happen, by the way, if Raila decided that tomorrow is walking from Karen to Capitol Hill? What would happen? Now that Peter has said, what would happen? Yes, or even today. What would happen if Martha Karua decided that from Muthaiga she's walking to town?
But let me ask you.
What would happen if Kalonzo Musyoka decided he's walking to town? What would happen if Jeremiah Kioni decided that he's walking to town? They're not driving. They will not just walk.
For how long would they do that?
They don't have to do it for long. By the way, this civil disobedience doesn't have to be done for long, mm-hmm. because research has also shown that governments sometimes only listen to civil disobedience because it is the only thing that destabilizes almost everything and brings everything to a standstill. There is foreign direct investment that we strongly depend on today in this country, just like in many other countries. There are so many things that are dependent on the peace and harmony that we have today. There are so many things that are dependent on an economy that is a going concern. But I can tell you, if people decided that if the top Azimio leadership decided that they are working, I'm sure Kindiki will do what Museveni did in Uganda. They will camp at their doorsteps because we don't want to see that kind of a scene. But let me just say that...
Hezbon,
yes.
With all these things, the Azimio team is calling for the entire repealing of the Finance Act. This has already been signed into law. How, and I'll get, to Nordin will give us the legalities of that, but what is the reality? What is the viability of it being changed back, going back to, I've never seen anything like that happen before.
You see, let me just explain to you within the context that I understand it. Mm-hmm. And this is a very political perception of everything. Mm-hmm. I don't think there was anything Azimio was going to do that they didn't do as far as this bill is concerned. I think they've been hit hard. But when the bill was passed, yeah, the number of people were saying that, you know, Azimio members of parliament were not in parliament.
Which was the fact.
Yes. And you see, that is what basically tells you that we needed the finance bill. But you see, when each and every clause was being discussed in parliament, they had amendments for each and every clause. They had, you know, all these amendments were defeated on the floor of parliament, which is not bad, you know. And I want to agree with Peter that when a political party forms government, you know, they go around the country. During their campaign, they went around the country telling people this is what we will do. And they expect their members of parliament in parliament to provide that legislative framework that would help them do everything that they promised people. And they are within their rights to use their numbers to pass any bill that they want, whether that bill is serving Kenyans or not, you know. But just like Peter said, in a democracy, majority have their way and minority have their say. So now that they have this bill, and Azimio had their say, but they were defeated, ask yourself, even before this bill was passed, what was the sentiments of Kenyans? Because, you know, we might argue here about majority having their way, but we forget one thing. When you form a government, the ruling party that forms a government has a mandate for a limited period of time. And even if they are going to have their way, the assumption is they'll have their way as a collection of the sentiments of the people who gave them that power. Now, majority of Kenyans who probably elected these MPs and elected this government have expressed their sentiments. I think this is the bill that has attracted the highest number of memoranda in parliament. I think that committee received more than 1,000. This is the bill that has been discussed enough times, beyond anything that we've seen in this country. So you want to tell me that those sentiments of all Kenyans, you know, can be wrong, even if MPs decide to go against the sentiments of Kenyans.
But with with some of the recommendations within the memoranda, weren't they part of some of the things that led to the amendments of the finance bill by the Kuria Kimani committee when they went back to discuss them? Isn't that part of allowing public participation into the process?
What did they change? I mean, the substantive issues that were raising a lot of uproar, and not just from Kenyans, but from different sectors. I mean, teachers had a problem with this, religious institutions, clerics, and all that, you know.
Right.
So the changes that they made, the fundamental issues around the 14%, 16% VAT was not touched. The issue of the housing levy, now it has become a tax. I mean, all that discussion of you can get your money back and all that, no, you can't get it back. You can't, I mean, there's no guarantee that you'll get a house. So the bottom line is, people might be thinking that Azimio is just calling for civil disobedience, but we need to look at the bigger picture. Maybe Azimio is just harnessing the sentiments of the many Kenyans whose aspirations and wishes were not captured by the vote in parliament. And I think that should be the worry for the government, that many people are likely to be part and parcel of this civil disobedience simply because of the consequences of this Finance Act.
Okay, let's hear from Nuruddin. Well, you say they're going to be part, but really, Hezbon, if I asked you to walk, would you be part of the civil disobedience if you're going to have to walk from your workplace to home?
I can tell you, even if everyone in this building right now does not walk to work, if Raila decides to walk, our not walking to work will be irrelevant and immaterial, because the number of people who will walk outside there, even us, we will be shocked.
All right.
So it might not be about sampling people who are comfortable and privileged. My two friends here are very privileged. I mean, I don't think I'm assuming. I don't think
you should not allow him to cast aspersions on us.
Oh yeah, you shouldn't. Yes. But you never know.
Yeah, I'm just assuming that. I mean, we may not be representative here of the people who will be outside there walking.
Okay, let's hear from Ruto.
Well, you know, by virtue of the president signing that bill that came before him, it becomes the Finance Act 2023. And now when you hear the Azimio principal, Raila Odinga, say that they want to repeal, that means they either want, that's more or less abrogation. And that can only be done through subsequent legislation or constitutional amendment. Now, what they have here is subsequent legislation. Now, meaning they have to try and amend that law or that act that now is Finance Act 2023 and go and tackle things they feel are more or less punitive, as they call them. Things like the housing, the section on 16% on fuel. Now, that will be a tall order, seeing that members of parliament, how they behave. Now, we have a situation where there is a court case, a live court case. That is Okiya Mtata's case that he was denied orders the other day, trying to stop the implementation of the act. In that petition, he seeks clarity on housing. Because you see, we have a problem where you're going to collect money, but there are no regulations. Government does not collect money without regulation. There's no legal framework. And that is a problem. That in itself is an illegality. Because when you ask those who are in parliament, the leaders of Kenya Kwanza in parliament, they say, and quote Didi Nyoro, he said, they'll collect that money and put it somewhere in the consolidated fund. Now, what stops that money in there from being used in current expenditure? And noting that now it's a tax, meaning whether you want or not, it will be deducted. Whether you want a house or not, it will never be refunded. So there's a legal framework that is missing, which in itself makes that act of collecting that money an illegality. And that is why the matter is before court. And so I remember Otiende Molo said, while they were in the House, that if whatever they're trying to do in Parliament fails, courtesy of the many, they were being called hyper amendments, if they fail, they'll use the courts. If the courts fail, then they will go to the people. Now I see Raila has already gone to the people. And courtesy of that, on the 7th of July, the rebirth of Saba Saba is back. Now this takes us to a place where, if, for example, this act is not amended, now the punitive taxes, as they call them, will be upon us as a people. And now, as Hezbollah is saying, whether we walk or not, people will walk. But the sad reality is that even today, there are those who walk to work. But the passage of this act, it means the number of people walking will actually be more, whether Raila walks or not. So I believe, in as much as he says people walk and it's turned into a political gimmick in that, why are you not walking? In reality is that more people will walk. We have a number that walks to date.
Because they cannot afford
Because
transport.
they cannot afford. Now you imagine the 16%, the number is going to go high. And then you also look at, for example, as they say, the number of people who are employed is meant to go down because most employers might decide to downscale. What happens to those who are downscaled? They become unemployed. And it's an entire Pandora's box, it's an entire problem. And I believe, yes, we do need some subsequent legislation, some amendments to the act, because this my road or the high road really doesn't help anyone. Because if, and my problem number one is in the housing, if there is never, if they fail to put the legal framework, which they keep saying they will, so you're going to collect money without a framework. You see that in itself, how you put in the cart before the horse, it doesn't work that way. What stops that money from being misused or misappropriated? And noting that the house that we have right now puts us in pains. Because if, for example, you look at what has been happening, I don't know if most Kenyans are aware, you have a member of parliament for Homa Bay Town trying to amend the Anti-Corruption Economic Crimes Act by deleting section 64 so that anyone convicted of an economic crime can still get to serve in public office. You have members of parliament who deleted, I think it's section 62 or something, that allows you to be in office without stepping aside if you have a live case. So you look at what is happening, the priorities leaders have vis-a-vis what people want are two different priorities. And if, for example, we don't look into the issues that are being raised, forget about things like the tax evasion that Raila is saying or whatever. But if we don't have people-centric laws, believe you me, it doesn't have to be Raila to lead the people. One way or another, people just get themselves out there. Because you get to a point where you're more like, enough is enough. I have nothing more to lose, I have nothing more to gain. So at the end of the day, I believe, yes, we do need to do some amendments so that we actually, number one, have people-centric laws. Number two, take care of the taxpayers' money. Because the issue he raised is that we have an issue of collecting taxes, in that the government wants to collect taxes. But have we sealed the loopholes? Because if we are collecting and there are still loopholes, what stops them from being misappropriated? Remember, the president is on record saying there are people in KRA who aid tax evasion. There are people in KRA who are doing ABCD. Have we sealed those loopholes? If we haven't, they might hit the target they want, but we might never actualize the plan they have with that money. because of the loopholes, courtesy of corruption. So unless we do that, because corruption is a very mute agenda in government, unless we realize that, we'll find ourselves in a situation where it's penny-wise, pound-foolish. Because you even look at, we are being told to sacrifice for 2 to 3 years, but those in government are not sacrificing. Things like this, I see Raila mentioned motorcades here. That's a very good one, by the way. That what people can do, because you have CSs with a convoy of eight vehicles. You wonder why. Taxpayers mind that one. So at the end of the day, I believe the largesse needs to come down. You look at how those in government are living. We've seen certain photos going around of watches, and we have issues of houses being invaded at night. So we have to get to the reality that we have to be more people-centric vis-a-vis selfishness.
Peter, yeah.
You know, I'm not an authority in the legal field like my learned friend here, if I am allowed to use that phrase for now. But I know that you cannot pass regulations before you pass a substantive law. For instance, if you want to do house like the Hustler Fund, you first of all had to pass the Hustler Fund and then bring regulations for passage. So I think when it comes to the housing, we have approved the finance bill that seeks to amend, I think, Section 17 of the Housing Act. Once you amend Section 17 of the Housing Act, you can now bring the regulations that govern that fund therein. So I do not think that that fund is going to be misused, because immediately the necessary and the relevant House committee will now introduce the regulations of the housing fund, so that it is the one that will explain how the fund will be corrected to you, how it will be channeled, how you will be able to get the house.
But Peter, that has been quite a huge debate. But there are those who feel like there should already have been
you know, this is
structures in place.
This is our legal framework. You first of all have to pass the substantive act of Parliament, and then you can follow it with the regulations.
And remember, this isn't a fund anymore. This is a tax.
Yes. No. It is us that want to make it as a tax. It's a levy. There is a very, there is a very big difference.
I feel like this is a whole conversation that
but the question is, how do you call money that you contribute and you will be given with interest tax?
Which money will
How does it qualify to be tax?
That money doesn't come back.
Yes.
So after the amendments were made in Parliament,
it became,
that money is a tax. It's gone.
Whether
you get a house or not, it's none of their business.
That's not the case. That is misreading. It is misreading. The fact that Noldin Kagai here is the lawyer in the house does not qualify him to mislead the public that that money does not come back, because there is a regulations that are already, I think they are already printed by the government printer. They are waiting to be introduced in Parliament that is going to govern the housing fund. So that is one. The other issue I have heard him talk about, it is the issue of government leaning on the recurrency expenditure. If you look at the business dairy, you will see the measures that Professor Jogona Dongo has introduced to curb on the recurrence expenditure that is going high. Look at the Honorable Raila Odinga. He is talking about government stopping using guzzlers. Let us look into how much he has been allocated. As a former Prime Minister, he is one of the people with one of the big motorcades. He is actually telling government. Which is set
within the Constitution?
That's what I'm saying. That is what I'm saying is, one of the biggest challenge for the Honorable William Ruto's government, and I started by that when I came, it is how they will curb the recurrency expenditure. I agree with Noldin on that 100%. It is not right for a cabinet minister to be working with to be driving around with 7, 8 guzzlers that require to be fueled, to be serviced, require drivers, and all those things. It is waste of public resources.
All right.
So as much as they want to correct tax from Kenyans, Kenyans must see the government in real action on taming the skyrocketing recurrency expenditure.
All right, so very quickly, final remarks as we wind up. So what do you think? I mean, so obviously Raila Odinga has called for this massive demonstration on the 7th of July, a reincarnation of Saba Saba. Just very quickly, your thoughts on that as we move forward?
I think anybody trying to emulate today's struggle with Sabasaba is an insult to the very reason why we have Sabasaba, because what we are having in the name of opposition or in the name of political class, if I may say, it is a political class that uses leverage to satisfy its needs, not the needs of Kenyans. If Raila Odinga is out there shouting, it is because he has seen an opportunity to shine, which of course again is his political and democratic right to be able to do it. But I will add Kenyans that before you implement anything that the opposition is telling you to do, you need to look at the ramifications of doing the same. But I will also urge the government of Kenya Kwanza to, as much as they continue to collect tax from us, they must be able to cap the recurrency expenditure. Okay. And I'm hoping as we start next year, we may have a supplementary budget that reroutes some of the savings of recurrency expenditure into the development budget.
Hesbon, as we wind up Sabasaba, is it a reflection of perhaps what we anticipate and a reflection of what history has taught us?
Well, I mean, my history of Sabasaba is from the history books, and I don't think it's something that anyone would want to experience, you know, the confrontation between the state and the civil society and opposition leaders is not something that we need to be seeing in this day and age. Right. I think there are avenues for having constructive conversations that can address the issues that are affecting Kenyans today.
Right.
It is an open secret that the new norm or the new normal is not gonna be easy for all of us Kenyans. I think with the coming to force of this Finance Act, we are going to see a lot of changes in our income, irrespective of where we are. Whether we are in business, salaried people, will see reductions. And I think we owe it to the government to be obedient citizens, which is a good thing. But we need to interrogate the political party that has formed government and have constructive conversations and critiques on how you know, the new taxation regime would have a ripple effect and come back to benefit Kenyans in the long run. I think the bigger picture has been we have to cut our clothes according to our size. We have to deal with the debt crisis, and we cannot incur more debts for recurrent expenditure. Now we have a regime that is going to collect money from us to deal with both development and recurrent expenditure. And I think the first thing they need to do is create a pathway that will show Kenyans how this will make our lives better. It is incumbent upon them to deal with the wastage in government and corruption. It has come from people inside the government circles that there is too much wastage. You know, I think it is important that it comes from them. You know, my instinct tells me that probably the president and his team have a bigger picture to this, have this place where they are taking Kenyans that would solve a lot of our issues, you know, once and for all. Right. You know, but there are critical issues that would probably frustrate that, and it is not clear how the president and his administration have addressed that. And I think that is the worry, that if they can allay, I think Kenyans probably will be comfortable, you know, tightening their belts, pulling up their socks, or pulling up their skins, because not many have socks, in the next 4 or 5 years, and then we see what happens out of that. But ultimately, let me just say that, you know, they've been banding this word, you know, majority have their way, minority have their say. But let me just remind the political class that if it is not in the interest of the public, in a democracy like ours, power is given for a limited period of time, and the people who give you power will punish you if you don't act in their interest. All
right, thanks. Nuruddin, very quickly, final remarks.
You know, they say how you do anything is how you do everything. Meaning, if you have an haphazard way of doing things, everything will be that way. To me, the political class, all I have to tell them is that they need to be more people-centric. Anything you do or proposal you have or policy, first look at the ripple effect of that on the people. Because one, you have people out here who are going through so much, be it the economy, be it mental, be it anything. And we need to look at each other beyond Azimio and Kenya Kwanza. And that is why we have a problem. A bill goes to Parliament, and quickly, I'm Azimio, it's yes, I'm Kenya Kwanza, it's no. Quickly go and check how the Senate impeachment was run. That was a shambles. Because you look at what the committee came back with as a report, and you look at those who voted to save the man, who I don't know how he will be a DG in a county where he's not wanted, where they said MCAs, who are moving to court. And we need to look beyond political parties so that we actually make sure whatever we are doing is for the betterment of the people. We do understand that some are already jostling for 2027, courtesy of what we are seeing in Mombasa, courtesy of the UDF fracas we've seen in Mombasa the past couple of days. But leaders need to understand that there is no single vacancy in any position that we have.
All right.
All of them are occupied. So work on the people, implement your manifestos, because at the end of the 5 years, all we need to do is speak the manifestos and tick from the MCA level to the president. And if you have not achieved anything in that manifesto, I believe people are now mature enough, or they should be, to understand who fits the bill to be a leader and who fits the bill to a politician who can be sent home.
All right. Yes. Thank you, Nordin Kagai. Advocate and political analyst, has Bonawela media and political communications expert, as well as Peter Mushendu, political and data analyst. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming in this morning as we take a look at the state of the nation and state of political affairs in the country, following some of the developments that we have seen so far. And of course, we'll continue keeping you updated on some of those issues as we continue having a look at the papers online. Let's talk. The hashtag we're using on Twitter is AMLiveNTV, at NTV Kenya, at Zainab Ismail. Talk to me. Let's engage. This is where we wind up, because your world is coming up shortly with Winnie Lubembe. Have yourself a good morning and a fantastic Thursday.
When you've gotta go, go for Neptune, the softer two-ply tissue paper, available in plain white and colored.
No bunga pagi pendene lace the mystery. No bunga ti browse on flick the mystery. No bunga me gonna next week the mystery.
Only on the trend. 10 p.m.
The Trend, in association Techno Common 20 series.
Let me tell you, we're thirsty. Thirsty. Well, Bubba's are thirsty for kienyeji. Thirsty. Yeah. You got my guy. He's thirsty for Sherehe. Thirsty. Mama Haria is thirsty. Thirsty for Ben 10. Thirsty. You're thirsty. I'm thirsty. We're a thirsty nation. Thirsty. I'm telling you. Thirsty.
To get thirsty, dial star 812 star 800 hash. Skiza, Nation.
Yuba, try it on.
Come on, why would I try on your dress?
First of all, I think it will fit you perfectly. And you're... How are you doing?
I'm fine. I have tons of things to do at my father's wedding and I'm running out of time.
Oh, Pedro. I have found you at last.
Bluebird peanut
peanut butter made with 100% pure peanuts and a good source of omega-6. Grow healthy and happy kids with Blueband peanut butter. Available in 200 grams, 400 grams, and 800 grams. Buy a pack today.
God is always engaged in our affairs. He's engaged in your life. He's engaged in the life of our community. He's engaged in the life of our church. He's engaged in the life of our nation.
We are here to thank you, Father. Thank you, Lord. We are here to thank you, our Father.
Every child must help his or her parent because they have to take care of them.
Our parents took care of us since we were young and they got tired.
Four furious friends fought for the phone. Four furious friends fought for the phone.
I am Princess Maya, Tekka Eagle Warrior. I'm proud to fight beside you.
A friend on your left and a friend on your right. Vive la company.
In all your doings, be kind and nice.
You're throwing money down the drain.
How? On this cleaning product? Impossible.
Harpic 10X. While other cleaners blow away, Harpic 10X's viscous formula in only one round of application gives you sparkling, clean toilets.
Harpic, 10 times better cleaning than other cleaning products.
And great savings too.
What is it now?
You must leave everything exactly as the way it is now.
Fine. We will do as you say, officer.
I hope you can hear me the way I could hear you. Just so you can see what it feels like to inhabit the world of shadows. I don't really care if you understand. I just want you to suffer as much as I did.
Eject him, they are looking for you.
No!
Come on, do it fast!
I don't like you snapping your fingers at me, Rodrigo!
Diego. I'm Diego. Rodrigo is in a coma. Head over heels.
2 out of 3 Kenyan parents felt that they don't spend enough quality time with their kids. You can help change this by giving a generous voice to Storytime. Visit our library of homegrown audio stories at cadbury.africa and make Storytime sweeter.
I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate the Nation Media Group and all the partners that will make providing sanitary towels to our girls, especially in the informal settlements and mission-based schools, free sanitary towels. So please join in and support this cause, because we know much as the government is providing a budget to provide sanitary towels, it is never enough. Let's end period poverty, let's give dignity to our girls, and let's make our girls go out there and not be ashamed of being on period, but being bold enough to say, I'm on my period and I have my sanitary towels. This will also help curb and end teenage pregnancies, because a lot of girls out there are being influenced to engage in sexual activity for sanitary towels. So let's team up together as a country, as citizens, to ensure we end period poverty.
Step into a world where sustainability meets prosperity at the Wheat Expo. Join us in Eldoret on June 29th to 30th, 2023 at the Central Primary Grounds opposite Zion Mall. Discover sustainable wheat cultivation and indulge in interactive sessions. Our farmers balance innovation and tradition to grow nutritious wheat. To partner with us by way of exhibition and advertising, contact Christopher on 0723 401 003. Let's cultivate a healthier, wealthier nation. Embrace sustainable farming at the Wheat Expo.
Get ready to tantalize your taste buds and embark on a culinary journey with Pishi Bomba, the ultimate cooking show that brings the flavors of the world right into your living room. Tune in this Sunday at 6:30 p.m. with me, Claire Karatu, from